there and welcome to U.S. History with Lennox. I'm Lennox and today we're diving smack into the middle of APUSH topic 3.9, the U.S. Constitution. Now in a previous video we discussed how in 1787, 55 delegates came together in the city of Philadelphia. While there, they drafted a new document that expanded the influence of the national government. There was a necessity for this because the existing government, the Articles of Confederation, was just too weak to be effective. So what we're going to look at today is the structure and the function of the U.S. Constitution. And there's two main provisions you need to be familiar with. And that is federalism and the separation of powers. Now, federalism, that's one of those terms that we tend to completely misrepresent and misunderstand what it means. Because when we hear the term federalism, we tend to lean towards the idea of the federal government or the national government. So a lot of times students want to say that federalism means more power to the national government. And that's not true. The term federalism does not mean the federal government has more power. In fact, the term federalism, and write this down and memorize it, the term federalism means the sharing of power between the national and state governments. It doesn't invoke more power to anybody. It actually divides power between federal and state governments. So they're sharing the power to govern the people. That's a main tenet of the Constitution, but one caveat. Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution, also known as the Supremacy Clause, states that national law does trump state law when there is a conflict. So there are exceptions where the national government is stronger, and let's talk about those. To do that, we have to go to Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. It's there that you'll find what's referred to as the enumerated powers, or the powers that are given to Congress. For example, one of the enumerated powers that the federal government has, the power to declare war. If our federal government declares war, that's not something up for debate amongst all the states. California can't say, hey, we out. We don't want to take part in this. We are all together on this one. That's a power that the federal government has, and the states cannot overrule that. But on the other side of the coin, you can find the 10th Amendment. And what the 10th Amendment says is powers not delegated to the United States are reserved to the states. So anything not listed in the U.S. Constitution, well, that's a power that the state has. So when you look at the governing of the United States, some power is delegated to the national government, while other powers are reserved for the state governments. That's federalism. The other major tenet of the Constitution is the separation of powers. And this is where we find our three branches: the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. The legislative branch was designated to make the laws. The executive branch, or the president, has the power to carry out or to enforce the laws. And finally, the judicial branch, they have the power to interpret the laws to make sure they align with the U.S. Constitution. What's very interesting is if you look at the articles, Article 1 deals with the legislative branch, Article 2, the executive branch, and Article 3, the judicial branch. Article 3 is the shortest of the three, yet its importance in our country cannot be understated. But more on that in a later video. Also know that within the Constitution, the framers set up a system of checks and balances. The purpose of these checks and balances was to prevent any one branch from becoming too powerful. An example of this is the legislative branch has the power to make the laws, but the executive branch has to approve those laws. And if the executive branch feels the law is not good for the country, it has the power to veto that law. That's the check that the executive branch has on the legislative branch. But there's another check on the executive branch. The legislative branch can come back and with a 2/3 majority vote can override an executive veto. These are just a few examples of the checks and balances that exist within the Constitution. The bottom line is the framers created the Constitution recognizing that our government is going to be manned by human beings. And it's not unnatural for human beings to always seek more power. James Madison in Federalist 51 said, if all men were angels, there would be no need for government. Well, all men are not angels. And that's why our government is structured in a way that no one can get too much power, and tyranny should never be a threat to our country. Well, that's the Constitution in a nutshell. I appreciate you watching, and we'll see you on the next one.